All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in last week. Heath Esslinger here from Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So excited to be back live on Facebook this week, man. Over 15,000 views last week as we went live. I mean, such an honor. I mean, it's awesome to see there's kind of this movement in the sports world. Thanks to those guys that have just joined. There's this movement in the sports world to kind of do things differently, to think of sport a different way. We like to call this putting sport in its proper perspective. If you like the things we're talking about, not just me, but so many people out there that are challenging how we do sport, man, share this, tag your friends, make a comment, share this video. I would love to get to the point where we're seeing 50,000 people a week watch these videos and setting them free, not being kind of in the bondage of sport, but being able to enjoy what sport has to offer. So really today we're going to talk about what is the primary purpose of sport. You look at the sport industry and it's $1 billion industry, man. We're spending insurmountable amounts of money at 5 and 6 years old on this thing called sport, mainly because we've kind of idolized sport. We've put it on this pedestal that maybe sport doesn't even belong, but we've done that. So what is really the primary purpose of sport? You know, when I ask people that, they'll talk about teamwork and fitness and resiliency and all these things. I'm not so sure that that's the primary purpose. The primary purpose is this: joy and wonder. The purpose of sport is to capture kids' imagination in both process and pursuit. And the thing about sport is, sport really falls under this umbrella of play. Kids love to play. I'm a 41-year-old adult. I still love to play. Love to play all sorts of things. That's why we have all these different games that we play when we get together as adults. But sport really falls under the umbrella of play. And here's what we know about play. Play is life-giving. Competition is life-draining. That's why coaches are ready for the season to be over. Athletes are ready for the season to be over because competition's life-draining, but play is life-giving. But at some point in a kid's life or in our lives, play gets a little bit boring. So here's what we do. We put boundaries on it, and those boundaries become a game. So play moves from just play to boundaries, and we call it a game. I've always said this: I cannot wait. I hope one day I get to meet these guys in heaven. The two people that were standing out on a dirt driveway with a milk crate on a telephone pole or on a tree, and they were shooting basketball. And all of a sudden, they look over to the right, and they see a horse in the field, and they look at each other and go, hey, let's do this. If I make the next shot and you miss it, you get an H. If you get all the way to E, I win the game. But they were bored. That boredom caused some creativity, and that creativity led to this game that you and I still play today. Well, at some point, play gets boring. We add boundaries, it becomes a game. And at some point, a game gets boring. So here's what we do. We add the spice of competition. And here's what we know about competition. When we add the spice of competition to sport too early, here's what happens to sport. It becomes diseased. And if you were to be honest, and if I were to be honest, as we look around the sports culture today and we go to youth fields and whatever level, there's no level where we're really just doing it right. But if you were to look at it, you would be honest and say, like, sport is a little bit diseased. I wrote this morning. Parents aren't fighting, coaches aren't cheating, and kids aren't crying because we're playing. All of those things are happening because we've gotten so consumed with competing, we've completely lost sight of the primary purpose of sport. Here's what we've done. We've taken an adult model of sport, like the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, all these things, and we have dumped it on the backs of kids. And the sad reality is this, is that most kids cannot carry that load for so stinking long. And I'll have parents and I'll have coaches tell me, well, I just love sport because it teaches kids to be tough. Well, guess what? Making your kid make their bed teaches them to be tough too. I'm a big believer. If your kid can't make their bed, they shouldn't be making all-stars. There's a lot of ways to teach a kid to be tough. And we think by throwing them into this sports world and making them compete every weekend that somehow we're teaching them to be competitive. I firmly believe that in American culture today, the way we do sport, in an attempt to teach our kids to be competitive, we're actually teaching them to be complacent. All right? Because they compete so much. Listen, you can't be here 180 days a year. All right? We've forsaken practice and we've gotten so caught up with competing that I really think we've actually lost the art of what it means to be a competitor. And I'll even have parents say, well, my kid, they just get really upset because they're a competitor. They really hate to lose. Newsflash. You ready? I'm going to step on some toes. Your kid does not pitch a fit because they're a competitor. Your kid pitches a fit because they're a baby. All right. And my 6-year-old pitches a fit because he's a baby. Listen, you don't have to teach a kid to hate to lose. No one likes to lose. My 6-year-old, if he competes with his older sisters and he comes in last place, he crosses the finish line and says, I won, because he hates to lose. Hating to lose does not make you a competitor. Being a competitor means you're willing to make some sacrifices, or all the sacrifices necessary in order to get a W or actually compete and pursue excellence. It is unfair to expect a 7 or 8-year-old to actually know how to compete. And if they do, it's probably just by nature. All right. They don't really understand all that goes into that. So listen, as you go on this journey, and a lot of us are on this journey, man. I pass ballparks and fields all the time, and they are full of cars and they're full of people. And unfortunately, a lot of times no one's having fun. The parents aren't having fun. The kids aren't having fun. And listen, at times we need to call a timeout and go, why are we really doing this? Is this really accomplishing the primary purpose of sport? Is their imagination really, are they captivated? Are they trying to figure this thing out? Or am I just dumping this on them so early that by the time they get to 12 or 13 years old, they're going to be so stinking bored, they're ready to give it up? I use this illustration a lot. Imagine if you had a sponge. All right. And as we parent and as we coach on this journey, imagine you had a sponge and you were to dip that sponge in water. And I were to start counting at 5. And I said, hey, I want you to squeeze all the water out of that sponge. And it was 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. At about 11 or 12 years old, here's what would happen. You would have all the water wrung out of that sponge. And then what if we dip that sponge in the water again and I were to start counting 12.5, 13, 14, we'd probably get to about 19 or 20 and the water would be out of the sponge. Here's my challenge for you. As parents and coaches, we have to decide when we're going to squeeze the sponge, because I believe we're squeezing the sponge so early that when kids really need sport in their life, there's no water left in the sponge. And that's why we have this term now called 12-year-old burnout. I mean, listen, how are you burned out at 12? You're just going into middle school. That is sad, and that's not the kids' fault. That's our fault as adults. We're looking at sport through the wrong lens. We've lost perspective. We've gotten consumed with now, and we need to just zoom out and actually look at this thing through the right lens. So here's my deal. Let's let them play. Let's let them play. I have never seen two moms get in a fight because their kids are playing. Yet I go to these youth events and I go to athletic events. We've even seen them. We've seen it in the news where parents are getting in an all-out brawl at a 10-year-old event. Folks, listen up. Parents aren't fighting because our kids are playing. Parents are fighting because we truly believe that this event is epic in our kids' life. It's not. They're 10 years old. No one cares. Let them play, let them learn, let them enjoy what sport can bring. And then at some point, here's what's going to happen. They're going to choose whether or not they want to be great at this thing. It may not be sport they choose to be great at. It may be academics. It may be something else. But what we want to do is make sure we're giving them an opportunity to be great at whatever they choose at that appropriate age where they can actually choose it. They're not choosing it at 8 years old. We're probably choosing it for them. So Here, a couple of reminders. Listen, man, there's a lot of great stuff out there right now on this. We're going to have a parent event coming up on Monday, November 5th. Monday, November 5th, we're going to do a parent event. That's going to be at Silverdale Baptist Church, Creekside. We can only host about 400 people. We'll be sending out a link to sign up for that here shortly. But we would love to have you at that parent conference. Again, if you like this content that we're sharing, we're trying to make it short each week, but if you like this content we're sharing, then make sure you tag someone, you share that, you make a comment, and we get this information out, because I do believe this. I believe sport can be an unbelievable platform for us to make a difference in people's lives. but sport has to be in its proper perspective. When we take sport out of its proper perspective, we know this: sport can become diseased and it can become dangerous. And our kids are too valuable to us for us to allow those things to happen. So reminder, November 5th, parent conference coming up. We'll send that link out. Here's my challenge to you as we end today. Coaches, coach them hard, man, but love them harder. Coach them hard, but love them harder. They need to know that they are valued. Hold them accountable, but let them know that you love them just as much as you want to coach them. Parents, here's my reminder to you. Don't focus on coaching them. Be their parent and let them know how much you love to watch them play. And I promise you, if elite level athletics is in their cards, you will actually propel them towards that versus being a stumbling block in their life. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you share this contact. We look forward to seeing you next week.